Randy, please state your name for the record. Welcome, and
My name is Randy Phillips, and I'm here today to represent the Arizona Bowhunter Association. And before I start, I want you to know we did not support 2072. The Arizona Bowhunter Association would like to ask you to reconsider the department's position on moving the archery deer in 3A3C to a draw. Moving this unit to a draw will not do anything significantly to impact the deer population. It is only put in place for fairness among weapon types. We have history in Kaibab and 3A3C to see what that draw would look like. The following example of 3A3C is from a period of 2007 to 2011. In 2007, we were over the counter. We had 527 hunters harvest 19 deer. In 2008, we went to a draw. We reduced it to 150, and they harvested 16. In 2009, we were a draw once again. It went to 100. It was a draw at 150, and they harvested 29. We dropped that and then went back to over the counter in 2010. We had 493 hunters harvest 36 animals. In 2011, over the counter, 711 hunters harvested 12 animals. So you will see we lose 587 hunters and save the lives of 20 deer. That does not seem to be a great value for the amount of hunters lost. The numbers will show the vast majority of people who hunt with a bow that it's a second choice opportunity. It's just an opportunity to get in the outdoors to be with friends and family. The plain truth is the vast majority of bow hunters have a very low odds of harvesting anything with their bow. They are clearly going just for the opportunity to hunt. In Kaibab, we find almost the exact same situation. In 2006, we were over the counter. We had 1,391 hunters harvest 158. In 2007, over the counter, we had 1,362 harvest 110. In 2008, we went to the draw. We had 1,000 hunters harvest 130. 2009, we went 1,090 hunters harvest 180. That's the most bow hunters ever shot in Kaibab, and that was under a draw. In 2010, we were reduced to 850 and we harvested 88. If you take the average between the over-the-counter years and the draw years, you come up with, in the Kaibab, in the draw we had 980 hunters harvest 132 deer. On the over-the-counter, we had 1,376 hunters harvest 134 deer. So once again, we lose 396 hunters for the cost of 2 deer. In this day and age, where hunters of the human type are rapidly approaching the endangered species list, the cost of fairness between weapon types seems to be extremely high. The problem with fairness is that we are mathematically tied to the general hunt. Bow hunting is not allowed to grow at its own rate. It's important to understand the total impact when a bow hunt goes to a draw. The first thing that will happen is we're going to end up with less bow hunters. That will affect our overall percent of the pie. The second thing that happens is hunter success rate will typically more than double. That also affects our pie. So what we end up with at the end of the day is an overall drop in bow hunters and a higher success rate, which means we will get lower percent of the pie next year. Yet another problem. What happens to the 500 to 600 hunters that can no longer hunt 3A3C? I wonder how many of them guys used to go hunt the Kaibab. Surely some will give up and stop hunting. Others will move on to the next hot spot, whether it be Payson or Williams. When they do, a couple things will happen. 2 years from now, I will be standing here in front of you telling you the exact same story about a different unit. The local hunters will be upset. We will probably exceed our 20% quota in them units. By then, which will actually probably be 18%, and that unit will move to a draw as well. We are literally going to legislate ourselves out of bow hunting. I do understand the concern of the local hunting population. After all, who wants to show up to your favorite hunting spot and find somebody else there? But here are some things you need to think about before we make that decision. If someone really wants to hunt that particular area without a lot of hunter pressure, they can hunt the last weekend of the hunt. We all know the hunting pressure dramatically drops during the second week of the hunt. Secondly, if that bow hunter is concerned about too much pressure, He has 51 other units that he can choose from that will have less pressure. Why should we have a small group of hunters affect so many when they have other options? Just because it's not my personal preference to hunt a spot that has a lot of hunters does not mean it's not a quality hunt for others. We do not need survey cards, we do not need questionnaires. The fact that 700 people chose to hunt that spot over other areas in the state shows their preference. If you ask them about other hunters, I'm sure they'll complain. It's human nature. But they cast their final vote with their choice of where they spend their vacation days and their dollars. Bow hunting 3A, 3C is clearly not impacting the deer population or the age class of bucks. It is clearly a social issue that will resolve itself. If 700 hunters are too much for that particular area, they will move all by themselves. They do not need our help. Here's your chance to make a direct difference to hunters. Let bow hunting grow at a natural rate. Do not overregulate it. You can always change it next year if you deem it necessary. I will close with one final question. Today when you vote, will your vote promote and foster hunting? I don't see how limiting hunting opportunity could possibly do that. Thank you.
Randy, I got bad news for you. I agree with a lot of what you said, so you're in trouble. And I also want to thank you for a month or so ago, I called you and needed to talk to somebody, and I appreciated the grace and time you spent with me on the phone. Do we have questions for Randy? Commissioner Husted?
Yeah. Randy, Mr. Chair, Randy, if you're good at what you do. You're a passionate advocate. If I needed a lobbyist for something, I come look for you. But I gotta say, I'm not sold on a lot of those arguments. You know, I've been thinking about this a lot, and as I go around the state and as I take public input, whether I'm sitting in Jacobs Lake looking at the guys, looking at their discs, arguing about which water hole they're all putting their camera traps on, we've got to start thinking about this. Just like everything else, we have a tremendous demand on this resource. And even in your arguments, you were talking about losing those 752 hunters. They're not lost. Even in your arguments, you said they'll just go somewhere else. And so if we're trying to create certain enclaves where things are a little better, that's what we're trying to do. That's what I'd like to do. Those guys are going to go, and they may or may not impact that. They're still going to buy a bow from one of your clients. They're still going to buy a tag from us. They're just going to go somewhere else. Because you can't tell me that the guys who draw a Kaibab tag aren't also going to be holding an archery over the counter and be somewhere else later in the year or earlier in the year. They do have plenty of opportunities. So I got to say, I'm just trying to make sense of all of this public comment who wants to be somewhere where there's not a whole bunch of people standing on top of him. That's just my opinion.
If I could respond to that, and just one of the things that's funny about human nature in general is, I don't know what it is about hunters in particular, but you'll know the first thing that when you go out in the woods and you find a great spot to hunt, the very first thing that comes to your mind is, man, I hope nobody else is here. And for whatever reason, when it comes to government, if somebody's doing something and there's a lot of people doing it, their first thought is, man, we ought to regulate that. It's just human nature.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just want to finish it. It happens to fall upon us to regulate that. I hate regulations, whether they're from the federal government or my county building inspector. But I have to do that. And we're not, if your argument was taken to hunting, all of our arguments today are for nothing. All of our deliberations today, if we allow hunting to grow at its natural rate, as you suggested we allow bow hunting to do, we're done. We're going to kill everything on the landscape, and we'll just pack it up.
Jack, they killed 12 deer last year.
I understand that, but I also have been in the field a lot for 25 years as a volunteer for this, and I've seen a lot of dead animals that weren't collected. You know, and I'm not going to say that they're archers that didn't find their deer, but you know it happens sometimes. So I'm just saying that this is an enclave that I'm willing. I know I was going to get you with that one. I look at it, he's like, oh, you're going to get me. There is a wounding loss, but I'm just not supportive in this particular
1980s or 90s, I believe it was. I think you're going to find that archery out of all the weapon types has the lowest wound loss rate. Rifle and muzzleloader.
Are you shooting
And all the
shooting
other
a
ones
different
have a
arrow
much
at
higher.
at a higher speed and at greater distance than they were in 80? Probably.
Well, now you're talking about ethics.
We have.
I also have a gun that shoots a mile.
I know it, and we've got to police ourselves.
And I shoot it, so.
And we're, that's kind of the horn porn that we're talking about.
Commissioner Husted, we've got more questions if you can get to your point. Commissioner Harris. All right, Commissioner Mansell.
Thank you, Chairman, and Randy, welcome. And I also agree with a lot of what you had to say, except one thing, and I want to mention that to you. When we identify Unit 3 as a unit to be managed alternatively, one of the items that I like to see in that is a lower hunter density. And for that reason, I disagree with some of the things that you have to say. Maybe our archery number is a little bit too low, but I do want to keep the low hunter density in our alternatively managed units.
I'm still looking in Title 17 for where it says kids shouldn't have the same opportunity as adults, but meanwhile, do we have any other comments for Randy? Thank you very much, Randy.
Thank you.
Did any blue slips pop up in the regions? Okay. Gentlemen, I think we said we'd have further discussion after the blue slips on deer, which
Give them a little bit more in 3C to increase it, but not by a big amount, and leave it as a drawing permit.
leave it as a draw, but provide more tags.
Up to, and my number was looking at around 200.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add to Commissioner Harris's comments. I think I do see the value of not messing with the 3C youth tags this year, but would like to make sure we look at a different location in the future. I also think there's value to increasing the archery permits, and I think a number of 200 would be a good number. But I'd like to add to what Commissioner Harris has said. I'd like to also see a reduction of the antlerless permits in 12A West from 250 down to 175 to 100.
150?
100.
That was a form of a motion, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion by Commissioner Mansell with a second by Commissioner Husted to move the department's recommendation with the modifications of 200 tags for the archery in 3C, 3A, 3C, and 100 tags
There you go. Yes.
for antlerless in 12A West. Everybody understand? Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just
Mr. Davis?
if there's a possibility of, maybe we don't need it in the motion, but should the motion also include the recommendation or the instruction to look at moving the youth hunt next
I
year?
think they've captured that as an instruction. Yeah. They've captured that. That'll be,
Mr. Chairman, Leonard brought up a question, and then I quit listening to you guys. And so I'm not
That's
sure where
dangerous,
you're at
Brian.
now. But the motion, was that for the number of tags or for the increase? Yeah, for the juniors, was it 100 tags or 100 permit increase? 100 tags total, okay. And I apologize.
yeah, I don't think any of those numbers were incremental. They were the quantity. Okay. All in favor, say by aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries 5-0. Thank you, Brian. How about 10? We're going to take a